Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome and thanks for logging on. We are starting our day right. This weekend, we've got watches, and everything you see here is for sale. Reach out to me directly. I am Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com with your purchase and pricing questions. You have questions, I have answers. We buy what we sell what we buy. We are always looking to build inventory. Sell us a watch, sell us an entire collection. We make it fast, easy, we pay cash, no upper limit on value paid. Also, if you're interested in trading a watch you're not wearing for one that you will, we can often offer more value on a trade than an outright sale. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, getting started, we have two from Omega. We have the Aqua Terra, and then we have the Seamaster Diver 300 meter, both in striking color schemes. Let's start with the Aqua Terra. Last designed, or I should say redesigned, for 2017, the model gained a new movement, different case sizes, a dial redesign. Most notably, the teak deck concept went from vertical to horizontal, and the date moved from 3 down to 6. Now here we have the 41mm Aqua Terra in red gold. This is Sedna red gold, a higher percentage of copper than standard red to make it darker, and then a higher percentage of palladium to make it fade resistant. So this Sedna, like Rolex Everose or Hublot King Gold or Panerai Oro Rosso, it is darker and destined to stay that way long term. This is the Surf and Turf Seamaster. It's not a dive watch. It doesn't have a rotating bezel, though it is 150 meters water resistant. We'll pop this watch open right here. It's a timepiece that's designed to be just as at home at the country club as it is out on the waves at the yacht club, and it wears beautifully. On my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, you can see that red gold in particular works well with any skin tone, and this is a pretty narrow watch across the wrist. It's also fairly thin at well under 13.5 millimeters with a sloped case flank, one of the easier current automatic coaxial Omegas to wear underneath a sleeve or a cuff. Fantastic for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, though weighty. All in gold, you can feel the mass of this watch on the wrist. Taking a look at the bracelet, you can see it's a 3-link design, though it'll never be confused with the Rolex Oyster. It has a conforming end link, polished centers, satin shoulders, polished outer faces, removable links fixed in place using screws, and you can see on each side we have an intermediate sized removable link in case you are in between sizes. Double fold clasp, thick gauge red gold. You can see the use of ceramic spring-loaded pin snaps over time. The snick and the snap and the tolerances of the clasp will remain as tight as the day it left BN. Now, rolling around to the case flank, you can see lyre-style lugs. We've seen them forever on Omegas, dating back to the early 1960s. Screw-down crown, you can see both polished and media blasted. 150 meters water-resistant, effectively amagnetic, not anti-magnetic, and robustly shock-resistant. It has the heart of a sports watch, make no mistake, but it's also elegant. One might even say highly refined and more versatile than a big rotating bezel dive watch. On the dial, we have hands that are faceted, satinated, and polished for contrast, with a blue metallic base. The watch has 2 setting modes, one of which is a time zone adjustment that allows you to move the hour hand independently of the others, doesn't even stop the seconds hand, and you can move the date forward or backwards depending on which way you're traveling. You can also pull the crown out and stop the seconds. One of the interesting things about some Omega gold and two-tone watches is the use of partially gold movements. We've seen solid gold movements from JLC and Genus and FP Journe and Corum, but it's still unusual to see solid gold components, bridges even, on Omega watches. And you can see here we have an 18-karat solid gold balance bridge and a matching 18-karat rotor. And if you're wondering why this is an 8901 rather than an 8900, it's the presence of these gold pieces. 2 barrels, automatic winding, 60-hour power reserve, anti-magnetic, really amagnetic to over 15,000 Gauss, tri-level coaxial escapement, and very, very consistent as a timekeeper. Remember, this is a master chronometer, not just a COSC chronometer, so it's tested in 6 positions as a fully cased up watch. Yes, for chronometric precision, but also for water resistance, winding efficiency, power reserve, shock resistance, general durability, and anti-magnetism. Master chronometer is just a higher standard, and in fact, it's a standard available to anyone. It's not something Omega just made up to put on the dial, like, say, Rolex's superlative chronometer standard. Tudor is now certifying master chronometers alongside Omega. Oops, a little bit too short there. You can see all 3 hands are lumed, so it's easy to tell that the watch is running even in the dark. Let's take a look at the Seamaster. The original Diver 300 meter came out 30 years ago. I can't believe it. Rose to fame on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan from 1995. Initially, he wore quartz. Later, he wore mechanical, but its turn as a 007 watch made this one famous. That's probably why no other Seamaster besides this design has lasted so many decades. People still associate this watch with the glamour of 007. We've got skeleton-style hands that are known as the Bond hands, and for this generation, launched in 2018, the Omega Wave dial came back after a hiatus between 2012 and 2017. It's laser ablated on a green ceramic base, so the dial is green ceramic. The bezel insert is green ceramic. You might think, well, that doesn't look like a 2018 color scheme. That looks like a very modern one. And yes, 2022 was the year of green dials, and that's the year this came out. 42 millimeters in diameter, 50 millimeters lug to lug. We have a 120 click bezel. Let's hear it. It is extremely crisp and precise. Line up that bezel pearl with the minute hand. Let's do a quick loom shot. You will find that not only is the watch well loomed, again, all three hands, but the bezel pearl and the minute hand are both green, so you can easily read them at a glance relative to each other. Inside, automatic winding caliber 8800. It's everything the 8900 is, but a 55-hour power reserve and one mainspring barrel. Also, instead of the time zone hand, as on the Aqua Terra we just saw, this has a more conventional combination of hacking seconds and a quick set date. We'll demonstrate that. The quick set is a rather snappy component, and Omega, in good taste, made sure that the date disc is the same color as the dial. We have cold enamel filling in the numerals on the bezel. We have the helium escape valve. This generation can actually be opened underwater. If you're a saturation diver and helium intrudes into your watch, open this before you ascend, and when the internal pressure exceeds external by 2 to 3 bar, it will release the helium so it doesn't blow out your crystals and your seals. So there's a lot to love here. And it all comes on a matching green rubber strap. We'll throw it on my wrist, the 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Where's this one? Well, I own the original 41 millimeter, and I can tell you, eyes closed, aside from the fact that mine's on a bracelet and this is on the strap, I can't feel the difference. The watch is very comfortable, and I believe it's suitable for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference, maybe even 14 if your wrist is more flat and oval than round. All right, so we go from sports watches that are rugged and versatile, sports watches that are maybe a little bit more upper crust and refined. This watch, admittedly, is more of a sporty dress watch. It's a 2021 Grade 5 titanium 300-piece limited edition Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Perpetual calendar, and it's the latest generation with a Venturine moon phase disc and a weekly calendar on the Rehaut, or the chapter ring, outboard. Now, it does have loom, it is made of titanium, and it does look rather sporty. With a screw-down crown, you might mistake it for a sports watch, but at 20 meters water-resistant because of the pusher adjusters, you probably don't want to take this one swimming. Now, it has the Grande Tapisserie. It is the large hobnail. There's also the Petite, which is on the jumbo, and the Mega, which is on the offshore. The Grand and the Petite are cut on pantograph lathes, so mimicry engines from the 19th century, whereas the Mega is stamped. So this is one of the artisanal dials. Hands and indices are made of white gold to resist tarnish and oxidation over time, and if you look at that moon phase disc, you'd see not only do we have a photorealistic moon phase, but there is an aventurine glass base on which it sits. This is from the 41 millimeter School of Royal Oak sizing, so it is a big watch, and I'm going to advise you to think of it as more of a 43 millimeter round watch. It sits light because it's got a lot of sapphire and full titanium construction, but it is broad. You can see that from over the top. So I'm going to recommend this for 15 centimeter circumference wrists and up. I would wear this very comfortably. Just keep in mind that it does have a certain rigidity across the wrist, and you can see how the bracelet will not pull straight down 90 degrees out of the lug because there's a little bit of inflexible rigidity in the bracelet assembly. That said, the finish is outstanding. The finish you get on a Royal Oak is why you buy a Royal Oak. Since the very first one in 1972, designed by Gerald Genta, the intention was always to have a fully integrated case, lug, and bracelet combo so that it would read as a piece of jewelry as much as a watch, because Genta considered himself a jewelry designer first and foremost. You see the bevels, you see the satination, you see the channels to allow some flexibility between the links, and also how the ends of the intermediate links have been polished in places where it's almost impossible to see unless you roll the bracelet through the light. It takes 9 to 11 hours to hand finish a metal Royal Oak bracelet. And that's exactly what we have here. So while the movement, 5134 and JLC based, is beautiful, the external finish is a big part of the appeal. Taking a look, you can see it has a beryllium ring that runs all the way around the outside with 4 ruby rollers preventing the ring from contacting the base plate. Automatic winding, unidirectional, 19,800 vibration per hour beat rate, Gyromax style free sprung balance, bevels that represent some of the finest Audemars Piguets executed in the modern era. And Audemars Piguet does make this movement in-house, so while it is JLC based distantly, it's very much AP's own movement. You can also see the interior recesses of the rotor, exquisitely hand finished. You can see how many sharp interior angles are created where bevels meet in sharp creases. Just as good as it gets in the world of Perpetual calendar sporty dress watches. Here's another sporty dress watch, maybe even a little bit more sporty. Now, this is not a sports watch, but my goodness, does it have the same kind of brash attitude as an aggressive sporting timepiece. A limited edition of 28 pieces in white gold from 2004. This is the Roger Dubuis weekly by Retrograde Perpetual calendar. So the by Retrograde Perpetual calendar featuring retrograding date, retrograding day, moon phase, leap year, month, chronograph, and then externally via a extended index there is a week of the year indication. The center dial is a spectacular silver champagne sunburst, and we'll do a quick loom shot here just to remove all doubt. This watch does not have any loom, so while it does look like it might be loomed, I wanted to just show you it does not. It has Dubuis' distinctive 2000s era triple lug profile. This was the last of the Sympathy line, so technically this was the Sympathy by Retrograde Perpetual calendar with weekly calendar complication. This takes the system originally developed by Jean-Marc Viderecht and Roger Dubuis for Harry Winston in the late 80s, and it adds the complexity of the chronograph and the weekly calendar system. And because it is a perpetual calendar, it doesn't need to be touched until the year 2100. Lamagna-based chronograph movement, outstanding chronograph feel. It's technically a 43, though it is quite large. And actually, you know what we'll do? We will measure, as you watch, the lug-to-lug dimension. So it is just about 56 millimeters. A large timepiece and intricately finished. As you can see, we have polish, we have satination, and then within the recesses of the lugs, we have media blast. You can see pusher correctors for the calendar system, and it does feature the historic Sympathy drawn and creased case profile. We'll zoom out, throw this on my wrist. I really do believe that for this watch, you probably need a wrist a little bit larger than mine. Though it's rated as a 43, think of it more as a 45. Because it is 56 millimeters from lug tip to lug tip, you can see how it's a little bit out over the edge of my wrist, and that's perhaps more evident when you look at it down the barrel, where it protrudes profoundly past my wrist. It's not super thick, which actually makes it well suited to a dress cuff, provided your arm is big enough to where the watch you're going to have a cuff to match, and this will fit underneath. Now it has an RD 5610 movement, which is a Lamagna 2310, the same movement featured in Patek as the CH 2770, as the Omega caliber 321, only here with Geneva hallmark execution, capped column wheel Geneva fashion with a lateral clutch. You can see that we have the individual numbering out of 28. This is lucky number 14. Slow beat, 18,000 vibrations per hour. Manual wind, 48-hour power reserve. Hand-shaped overcoil hairspring, 5-position adjustment, and everything is world class. It's just a gorgeous looking movement. The steel parts of the chronograph, the brass bridges and plates. You can see even the bridge for the escapement underneath the primary balance cock has been profiled with satin on its top and beveling on its side. So this is real Geneva seal finish in a watch with a by Retrograde weekly perpetual calendar and moon phase and a column wheel chronograph. This is one hell of a retort to Richard Mille, proving a watch can be both bold and brash as well as beautiful. And this watch certainly is Geneva hallmark and deeply deserving of that distinction. Continuing on our sporty dress watch kick, let's talk about the Patek Philippe 6007G. Originally launched as a steel watch for 2020 in a limited edition, the 6007 for 2023 becomes a set of 3 colorful watches, a little bit like the Omega Speedmaster reduced Schumacher series in the mid-90s when they had yellow, red, and blue for Michael Schumacher's Jordan, Ferrari, and Benetton F1 teams. Well, so does Patek have yellow, red, and blue for this year in a white gold 40mm 6007G case. Now, this is the 6007G001, and it is overtly automotive. Not just the colors, not just the carbon pattern embossed onto the calfskin leather strap, but we also have that carbon pattern, and that is Patek's term for it, at the center dial, as well as a racing-style track outboard. So if you're familiar with racing dial Omega Speedmaster chronographs, it's because of the presence of this checkered flag-like motif outboard, reminding you of the flag thrown at the conclusion of a motor race. We also have a dial that's generally designed to look like a dashboard instrument, speedometer, tachometer, clock, on a 40s, 50s, or 60s classic roadster or sporting coupe. You can see that the lugs are strong. 48.5 millimeters lug to lug in gray gold. It's broad across the wrist, and the lugs have a lot of presence. Actually, the basic design of the watch is drawn from the 1992 reference 5000. So a lot of these design concepts have been kicking around for quite a while, and this is something of a Patek Philippe classic, as the 5000, 6000, 6006, and 6007 have always been the sportiest Calatravas, rivaled only by the Pilot series. It's a flat watch that fits easily underneath the cuff. The strap is gorgeous. I do like the carbon pattern, which makes it look like it might be a textile, but it's actually embossed leather. Matching yellow calfskin on the bottom. We've actually got a 26-330 SC movement here, which means we do have hacking seconds. And in addition to a hacking seconds function, I have a quick set system so I can rapidly cycle the date. The movement's a unidirectional automatic winder on ceramic bearings with a 44-hour power reserve, 6-position adjustment, free-sprung Gyromax balance, anti-magnetic Spiromax hairspring, and with the Patek Philippe seal and all of these other standards, guaranteed to run no worse than -3 + 2 seconds per day, which is far in excess of COSC chronometers. Just a really cool way of doing a dress watch that doesn't force you to wear a tuxedo in order to look the part. This can be worn with short sleeves. Here's something wild. This is a 50-piece limited edition from 2020. It is the Chronoswiss Open Gear Resec Electric Blue. It is a stainless steel case with electric blue CVD, not PVD, CVD. PVD starts with a solid or liquid and then uses a sort of line of sight application process to coat a case, whereas CVD uses gas exclusively, and it's not line of sight because the gas fills its vessel and then the surfaces to be coated are inside the vessel. So when you have intricate profiles that are often at right or obtuse angles to each other, or you have shallow recesses like coined bezel profiles or onion-style crown, CVD, or chemical vapor deposition, can more evenly and vibrantly coat them. Here we have electric blue in both satination and polish. You could see the strap, hornback alligator leather, the type you normally only see on Royal Oak offshores, also in electric blue, and my goodness, they're not shorting you the leather. Look how thick that is. It's about 1/4 inch. Magnificent. Now, taking a quick look, you can appreciate that this is a massive 44mm case with immense presence, but it does a good job mechanically of filling out that space internally. You can see we have hand guilloche, so reductive guilloche with a rayon pattern below the flying regulator display, which means you have literally flying bridges that stand above the guilloche dial base, and we have a regulator with hours, minutes, and then this retrograding 30-second display. So with the separation of hours, minutes, and seconds, we have a regulator. The original Chronoswiss regulator in the GR Long era of Chronoswiss debuted in late 1987 for the 1988 model year, and it became a signature piece for the brand. That was back when the watches were made in the Swiss tradition, but generally built in Germany. Today, the company has since 2012 been based out of Lucerne, which is why it says Atelier Lucerne on the dial, run by the husband and wife team of Oliver and Eva Epstein. And you can see that they have captured some of the spirit of the original with a very modern overall ambiance. There is plenty of lume, no problems there. And because the watch does use a high-grade ETA 2892 A2 automatic base, you do have hacking seconds if you wish, and the indices, which you could see are actually cylindrical blocks of lume. act as both daytime and nighttime markers. Flipping it all over, you can see on the reverse side, perhaps surprisingly, the watch is 100 meters water resistant, so on a different strap, you can take it swimming. You can also see that the balance and hairspring here are high grade. They're either top or chronometer grade. When you see straight spokes, you know, you're looking at either base or élaboré. When you're looking at the splayed spokes that have sort of an hourglass profile, you know, you're looking at top or chronometer. That said, the module is quite a bit larger than the base movement. As you can see, the complication module fills out the dial, but the base movement is only 25.6 millimeters, so quite a bit smaller than this 44 millimeter case. This watch is big, make no mistake, and on the wrist, you can see it probably pushes my 16 centimeter wrist right out to the limit. It's a little bit over the edge, so I'm going to recommend this watch for wrists no smaller than mine. I think I could pull this off and enjoy it, but I do think if your wrist is even fractionally smaller, you're going to want to go with the original long era Chronoswiss regulator, which was a much smaller watch. All right. Well, let's continue with our blue dial mini theme. Here's a watch that represents something like the best of the best from the Richemont group, as we have a Jaeger-LeCoultre Polaris base and case 70-hour JLC automatic movement with an IWC Kurt Klaus Perpetual calendar system. Now, you'll love that this watch, being 42 millimeters in diameter, 100 meters water resistant, and equipped with a bidirectional rotating internal dive bezel, is super versatile. Everything you need, Perpetual calendar programmed until the year 2100. And you could see that one point of adjustment, just one, moves everything in sync because it is the Kurt Klaus system. So the day, the date, the month, the leap year, well, you don't even have to worry about the leap year because you've got the year, the decade, the century, and the millennium. So you have a comprehensive perpetual calendar. When you push the adjuster, the date moves, but everything else moves in sync. So all you have to do is set the current date for the year you're in, and everything else, including the moon phase, will configure itself precisely. You do not need to go look it up separately. Taking a look in the dark, easy to view. This is the Polaris 68 style dial. The original Polaris came out in 1965, but that E859 Polaris diving alarm reached its definitive form with what's called the 68 dial, and that's what inspires this dial right here. We actually have a gradient blue. It's a lacquer fade from sort of a cobalt at center to navy at the edge. We do have that bezel, which acts as a useful timing reference. Through the case back, you can see the movement, which is a little bit small for the case, but fortunately you don't have to wear it upside down. And it has been through the Master 1000 hours control, which means this watch has been tested as a fully cased-up watch for chronometry, durability, everything. Power reserve, winding efficiency. It is an extensively vetted watch. You can also see we have here pull tab spring bars, so you can remove the bracelet and put the watch on a JLC factory strap. More importantly, because the quick release is located in the bracelet and not the case, if you want to put it on an aftermarket strap, you can also do that, and that's rare on watches that feature quick release bracelet systems and quick release lug systems. Now, internally, there's a sort of easy link like lobe adjustment. So you can snap that in, snap that out. It's about 2.5 millimeters of incremental adjustability on each side of the clasp. So you've got two of these for fine-tuning the fit. They've got quite a few removable links, so you will be able to get the right size. The watch has the case design inspired by the Polaris of the 60s, but very much a modern take. This is the case profile as introduced for the regular offering Polaris collection when it debuted as a full model line in 2018. You can see they've even gone with a dramatically boxed and cambered sapphire to look like a vintage 1960s plexiglass. I'll throw it on my wrist. It's comfortable. You can see that actually the lugs don't come anywhere near the edge of my wrist, so I'm wearing this watch quite easily. It's also flat enough to fit underneath the cuff. So while it is your diver, it is your dive timing reference, it is your perpetual calendar, at the same time, this is a watch you could wear with formal attire and not bat an eye. The bracelet is a fantastic complement to it, and it's nicely counterweighted from top to bottom, so I don't feel like if I wore it loose, it would want to hula hoop and move around. And you can see it is flat enough to fit under a sleeve. This is a fantastic all-around. I would say that after the Polaris Memovox, the Perpetual calendar versions are definitely my favorite. Here's a watch that's been controversial through the years. Let me just tell you what it is indisputably. A 47 millimeter Luminor 1950 8 days, the PAM203. 8-day power reserve, New old stock Angelus SF240 movement, more on that in a moment, a 150-piece limited series with each one apparently approved for its new owner personally by then Panerai CEO Angelo Bonatti. In 2005, these 150 pieces went almost exclusively to VIPs personally vetted by the CEO, and it was so contentious and there were so many recriminations from folks who didn't get an allotment that they created 2 years later 6 more as the PAM267 to satisfy all the folks who got burned. Now, it was also $20,000, meaning it was a price point where up to that point, Panerai had rarely played. And it does use an Angelus SF240 movement, very similar to that used by the 6152 combat watches of the 1950s. Of this watch, I could say, Panerai has created the closest modern-day equivalent to a 6152 that you can buy and wear. Now here's where things get controversial. First, the allotment. The allotment of watches was hugely political and much contested. Second, the price. When new, it was $20,000. That was a huge number for Panerai. Finally, and most controversially, the story behind the movement. Now, Jose Perestroika over at Periscope has done the best scholarship on this, but anyone with their wits about them would have realized that Panerai is great at spinning tales about its heritage and things that it just happens to find. Panerai finds a lot of stuff, and by that I mean they cook the books. This was originally a clock movement, and although it has been finished to an extent never seen on Panerai combat divers and reconfigured to work like a wristwatch movement, Jose definitely nailed it. This thing has been reconfigured from a relatively ordinary Angelus desk clock caliber to look like the mechanically similar but not identical SF240 wristwatch movement. So where does that leave us? Well, honestly, it still leaves us with a very special watch and the closest thing to a modern-day 6152 that you can find. First of all, the fact that there's any historical fabric in here means a lot to me because for the most part, modern-day Panerai watches use modern-day Panerai ETA and customer calibers. This did exist as a vintage movement of a similar architecture to what actually went in those Panerai combat divers. Second, the standard of finish here is far higher than any Angelus pocket watch, wristwatch, or desk clock application ever. You've got solarization on the crown wheel, on the ratchet wheel, a satinated swan's neck style click spring. You've got black polished screws. You've got a wonderfully drawn satination across the bridges. You've got mirrored anglage, the real thing finished by hand, and it's got fantastic depth to it with pivot jewels set in golden chaton. This is genuinely impressive, and I can get over the fact that the original owners bought a bit of a bill of goods in the story of the new old stock pieces being bought from jeweler Francesco Ferretti. This watch is a modern recreation of a classic using some historical fabric, which makes it incredibly appealing to me. Throwing it on the wrist, it's big, it's huge. It's about 56 millimeters lug to lug and 47 millimeters in diameter, but as a Panerai, that's kind of the look. It shouldn't look proportional. Unless you're Bruce Willis, Sly Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jason Statham, you probably don't have a wrist beefy enough to make this look proportional. So Panerai looks two things. One, on a large wrist, big. On a small wrist, huge. And on my wrist, it looks huge. But it also sits securely, and the case being basically 47 millimeters square, the lugs overhang the edge of my wrist, but the case doesn't. I could live with that. It's got an upscale strap for Panerai. Usually they're textile, calfskin, or rubber. This one's alligator leather. There is no shortage of luminescence, so the watch living up to its Luminor nomenclature. Historically, Luminor was a paint. Today, Luminor is a model line. It is an 8-day manual wind, just like the 6152. And although it looks like it might have a plexiglass, it's actually a sapphire right there designed to look like a vintage plexiglass. You've got the device protecting the crown, an ingenious Panerai innovation conceived in the late 40s, implemented in the 50s. And basically, it's got a couple of functions. One, more protection than shouldered crown guards. See how with conventional crown guards, a direct perpendicular impact can still damage the crown? Well, with this system, that can't happen. Second, see how with a conventional screw-down crown, if I back it out half a turn, you cannot see that. So this is vulnerable now if I do take it in the water. Whereas if your crown is unlocked with this system, even a little bit, it's hard to miss. Also, back in the day when these were manual wind, and this one is manual wind, when they were Rolex made and they had oyster crowns, you were threading it in and out every single day to wind and or set, which meant the seals wore out fast. Whereas here, you compress and you decompress. There's no threading in or out, so it preserves the integrity of the crown seal. Another thing that's important, it's easy to pull the lever open when your hands might be wet, sweaty, or gloved. As a result, it's easy to access the setting functions and winding functions of the watch. Unlocked. Wind to your heart's content. Now I can set. And just like that, I can close it up again. This is a very cool watch. This is one of the great modern era Panerai watches. I think if you just wanted to own two modern day Panerai timepieces, the ultimate Luminor would be this, and the ultimate Radiomir would be the PAM21, and I'm sticking with that. Now, I know I'm risking my reputation for connoisseurship when I admit this, but stuff like this, the Devons, Urwerk, De Bethune, MB&F, that's really the stuff I enjoy the most. So you can keep your Calatrava. As much as I love Patek Philippe, I think my heart beats in sync with this H20 from HYT. Now, back in 2017, HYT launched the lugless H0 case with their original 65-hour H101 movement. For 2018, a year later, they launched this, the H20, which takes the Audemars Piguet Renoir Papi built caliber 201 and puts it in the lugless case so it'll wear well on a small wrist. Make no mistake, thick, 20.4 millimeters, but it's a 51 millimeter watch that's also just 51 millimeters from lug to lug. That's about the distance across the wrist of a Rolex Daytona on a bracelet. So what I'm saying is that I can actually wear this and wear it beautifully. It's comfortable. It's easy to wear. Look at that. The lugs are nowhere near the edge of my wrist. You can see over the top quite easily. Yeah, it's fat, it's thick, and it's probably not going to fit under a cuff. But then again, you don't buy a watch like this to make it disappear. I adore this thing. We have a strap that's fully integrated and fixed by screws, which means it's extra secure. It's got a lot of little golf ball-like dimples in there. What is the fear of many holes? Tryptophobia, is that what it's called? And then we have a wonderfully supple HYT strap with a fun titanium buckle that includes a twin trigger release action. And then internally, there's this little push button micro adjust. You can see how when I push the button, I'm able to adjust it through a couple of incremental stops so I can fine tune the fit right there. Close that up, snap it shut, taking a quick look. What makes this movement different from the original is that it's designed and built by Audemars Piguet Renoir Papi, and it has an 8-day power reserve. It also has a full balance bridge, a free sprung balance, and a handmade overcoil. There's a little thermometer that sits on the flank that'll let you know when you're in the go, no-go zone, temperature-wise. You have a conventional Swiss lever escapement that drives a drivetrain that pushes 2 cam sets. We have 2 reservoirs splayed out like the V-twin cylinder heads of a motorcycle, and one is full of blue fluid and the other is actually full of clear fluid. So there's 2 fluids, a push me pull you setup. They're immiscible though, so they can never mix, and the meniscus between them is the hour. We also have a display for minutes at center, and then this little function indicator for the multifunction crown. So what happens when you reach the end of the travel, well, 2 things actually happen. First, you can see 3 modes. R, remontage, the remontage being winding en français. We have heure minute, which is the setting, and then we have neutral, which is when the crown is flush. Let's put it in setting mode. As that minute hand approaches the bottom of the scale, it automatically jumps right across. And you can see as the hour approaches the end of its travel, it will reach the end and then rapidly retrograde. So with the separation of hours and minutes, it's a regulator. And then with the jump back of the hour indication, it's a retrograde. Now, you may be surprised to find out that this watch is actually incredibly loomed, to the point where you can actually read the hour inside the borosilicate tube. So you can read this watch easily at night. You can see how in profile, all of the numerals are luminescent. In fact, they even loomed the crown function indicator, and you can see that moving in the dark. It's got twin mainspring barrels that are actually open, and it's easy to see on the reverse side approximately how much energy is in the barrels, because you can see the coiling of the springs. And the watch has a steel base, but as you can see, most of this case is actually sapphire. So rather than having a steel case with a sapphire, it's a sapphire case with a steel cap on the bottom. As a result, almost any incoming knock or bump against drywall, a seatbelt buckle, steering wheel of your car, a doorknob, it's going to hit the sapphire and the blow's going to glance off. And because this is an APRP made movement, the finish is world class. This is really the HYT that's got it all going on between ergonomics, mechanics, aesthetics. I'd happily wear that. And if you would too, or you have interest in any of these watches, reach out to tmosso@thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.